You're live.
No, thanks.
Rotate this.
We're live.
We're talking yet, are we?
No, you've got 1 minute till 4:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do we want to kill that door?
Yeah, let's close that door. So, Caitlin, they can hear us right now? Okay. That's good to know. So they heard me just ask if they can hear us right now. So folks, thanks for joining us. We're gonna get started in about a minute. So thanks for joining, and we'll get going in a little while here. And for anybody that's on there, if you can't hear us, okay, maybe shoot us a note volume-wise so we can get that adjusted before we start.
No, you've got 1 minute till 4:30.
There.
Slight delay, but you're live now.
Don Cherry delay.
Whenever you're ready.
So greetings all, welcome. My name is Jeff Chong. I'm with the Toronto Triathlon Festival, and want to thank you first for making time today to join us for this Facebook Live session. We've called it Demystifying Triathlon for Newbies. We're going to impart some wisdom from the panel here, who will introduce themselves momentarily. But today's session is really informal, and it's all about engagement. So please ask your questions. We'll do our best to address them all during the live session here. But if we don't, we'll be sure to address them in the replay. So shoot us a note, tell us where you're joining us from. Maybe in the comments section, tell us which distance you're doing. Are you doing the Olympic? Are you doing the sprint? Maybe the try? And shoot us a thumbs up if this is your first triathlon. Before I introduce the panel, maybe a bit of background on the TTF. The TTF, we dreamed up the TTF back in 2010 when we wanted to bring a triathlon and embed it into the city we love in Toronto. And we convinced City Council to let us get access to portions of the Don Valley Parkway and the Gardiner for the bike leg. And so athletes love to redefine rush hour, as it were. And they also get to bike past iconic landmarks like the CN Tower, the Scotiabank Arena, Go Raps, among other places. So lots to go with on the Sunday, but really what we're here to talk about now is the Try, which we're really happy to have added this year. So Saturday, July 20th, this year will be the first edition of the Try. So hopefully today we're going to learn a little bit about triathlons and answer some of your questions. But to start off, I thought maybe Blair, we'll start with you. Each of these folks will take 30 seconds to sort of introduce themselves and to convince you why you should listen to them today and how they got to be in front of you today.
Hi everybody, my name is Blair Larson, and I've been active in the triathlon community for 16 years now. 17 years ago I was a meathead and got bored with that and decided to take on triathlon and have not looked back since. It's a fantastic, addictive, rewarding lifestyle, passion, challenge that each person can take. And I still love it. I still do it actively today.
And I'm David Atkinson. I'm a vice president at Raymond James. We're one of the sponsors of the event this year. I did my first triathlon, a sprint triathlon, a couple of years back, so I still consider myself on some level a newbie. When I started, I had a lot of questions, sort of a lot of uncertainty around how the whole process works, from gear to diet and things of that sort. There are a ton of questions that I had, and I found that it was always helpful to be able to reach out to people who had done triathlons before to help sort of demystify the entire process. So I'm here today to help impart whatever wisdom I can to you that have questions.
Thanks for that, Court.
Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Lundrigan. This is going to be my 4th season in triathlon. My very first try was TTF back in 2016, before the days of the Try. I'm an active member of the Toronto Triathlon Club, so if you have questions about group training and how that can help you get to the start line at TTF, I can answer those, but anything about my general experience as well.
So thanks for that. Again, like I said, it's about engagement. So if you want to share the live with your friends so that they can join and ask questions and learn today as well, don't be shy with your questions. We'll do our best to answer them all live, but otherwise, as I said, we'll answer them in the replay. But maybe to kick things off, we all have a first triathlon story. Some are funny, some are sad, some are some other things. Maybe a good way to kick it off and to realize that, you know, triathlon can be serious for many people, but it's also about having fun, staying healthy, and staying in shape. For me, it goes back 16, 17 years, and yeah, it wasn't my finest moment, but I borrowed a mountain bike off my roommate at the time and went out to Guelph Lake to try my best in triathlon. And you know, I did breaststroke the whole way, well, at least half the way. And when I did decide to go front crawl, I found the only guy who also could only breathe out the left side. So we went way off course until the kayaker came and tapped me on the head and said, "You just, you know, added 150 meters to the swim." So clearly I didn't break any records, but the point was I was out there with some friends to have fun, and that's really what the TTF is about too. I mean, you can aspire to whatever your goal is. You know, if you're serious, you may have more lofty goals, but again, with the Try, it's a very welcoming community is what I would underscore. And, you know, Courtney and the Toronto Triathlon Club certainly, you know, can speak to that. But I think if you give triathlon a try generally, and the TTF specifically, we can speak to, it's a very embracing group, and we think your first indoctrination into the sport would be a good one. That's kind of my first story. Courtney, do you have something funny or your first triathlon story?
My first one was, as I mentioned, was TTF back in 2016. I barely knew how to swim. I had just taken swim lessons the year before. The swim was the most stressful for me, so I think I spent a little more energy in advance of the race worrying about the swim than I would have liked, and I think that took away from how much I was able to enjoy myself on race day. But I ended up actually on the run, I met up with a friend of mine and we ended up finishing the race together. And I remember I was within 100 meters of the finish line and one of my friends was cheering on the side, and I ran past him and I said, "I'm never bleeping doing this again." But the following year when I took the sprint on again and I was in much better shape, I ran past him almost at the same spot and I said, "I can't bleeping wait to do this again." So yeah, the TTF is always going to hold a special spot for me.
Lots of bleeping there.
Lots of bleeping. There was lots of bleep. I had to buy the photos that second year because I just saw myself coming across the finish line and dropping the victorious F-bombs, and you could just see the progression in the photos, and the photos were just amazing.
Now I know why we're on the 7-second delay here today.
Right.
Blair, maybe you can jump in, either you or one of your clients.
Or sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I can, I guess my first triathlon story, it was sort of unique in that I had sort of more of a background in swimming than anything else. I'm from Toronto, but I grew up in Florida, and there are pools everywhere in Florida, you know, lots of lakes and springs and the ocean, obviously. So swimming was sort of in my blood and not a concern for me, whereas it's a concern for a lot of first-time triathletes, or perhaps the, you know, the part of the race that gives people the most sort of trepidation. So I put a disproportionate amount of my training into swimming, unfortunately, because it's what I was sort of comfortable doing, and I'd also been cycling a lot. So I really had those two disciplines nailed down, and I hadn't really been doing a lot of running. So one of sort of the traps I think you can fall into when you're training for a triathlon is perhaps trying to do too much too soon in any one of the disciplines. So I sort of went out about a month or so before the race, and I sort of blew my knee out, which was really unfortunate. So that's sort of like a lesson learned for me. And I actually was thinking that I probably wouldn't do the race because it wasn't really clear to me how I was going to sort of get through the run portion. Everything else seemed to be fine. You know, the knee wasn't really acting up while I was swimming or cycling. But instead of trying to, you know, just you know, throw the entire process out the window and sort of you know, cancel my participation, I decided that I would, at a minimum, do the parts of the race that I knew I could do. So I got through the run and I got through the bike just fine. And when it came to, you know, came to the run, I have expected to put on my sneakers and to get sort of from my place in the transition zone to where I was actually exiting for the run and feel that I was really incapable of doing it. But for some reason, the knee sort of popped into place and it felt fine that day. So I did the run, and it was actually probably one of the fastest runs of my life. So there's a certain benefit, I think, to having faith in yourself, taking it slow when you need to, but having faith in yourself and sort of persevering. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of people sort of surprise themselves with respect to what they're actually capable of achieving.
Good stuff, Blair.
And my first event was in 2003 at Grimsby, and like Jeff, wasn't the best swimmer at the time, and ended up breaststroking the entire 750 meters in a scuba wetsuit because my friend who rented my suit for me thought it would be funny to be in a scuba suit versus an actual swimming wetsuit. 17 years later, a variety of different Olympic up to Ironman events. I've learned to look at the numbers in terms of how I prepare as a certified Ironman coach, and can really dive into the mistakes I've made and obviously impart on others that you can make a mistake in an event like that and make up for it in another section of the event or another skill like the run, for example, and really have a good time at the same time. It's fun. It's addictive.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Does the wetsuit zippers go in the front or the back?
Kind of went on the side.
Yeah. Okay.
But you look good.
Yeah.
So listen, folks, keep if you're out there, ask some questions. We don't have any right now, so I'll keep it going along because, as we joked about beforehand, we are 4 people who like to talk, so you won't be in silence here. But before I get to the first question that I'll pose to the group, maybe some just some background on the actual Try itself. So the distance is in July, so it'll be, as I said, Saturday, July 20th, down at Ontario Place. The swim is 250 meters. The bike is 6 kilometers, so that's 3 laps just across the lakeshore on the X grounds, and then the run is about 1.5 kilometers. So those are all eminently doable distances, even for people who are new to each of those disciplines. So we can get into that a little bit as well, but those are the distances just to give you some context. I'll throw this up to Blair first and then others chime in afterwards, but one of the things that I always hear, or I mean we've talked about this, you hear as well, is the notion that I'm not fit enough for a triathlon. And I think it's timely to ask this question because, having just laid out the distances for the TTF Try, they're not that bad, but maybe if you can speak to that when you hear that from clients, and then relate it back to the distances here at the inaugural Try here at the TTF.
Well, David kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's about he didn't use the word pacing, but not going too hard too soon. 250 meters, you can breaststroke that in 6 minutes. That's slow, meaning you can take your time with it. If you can front crawl, it's a lot faster. Was it 6 kilometer bike?
Yeah.
That's going to the ice cream store, basically. And 1.5 kilometers is going to almost to the corner store or down to Union Station almost. It's definitely doable, and if you stay within what you feel you can do, you can complete it. It's just one more step, one more pedal stroke, one more stroke in the breaststroke or front crawl. It's definitely doable.
So we got some questions here that we'll go to momentarily, but Lisa, Amy, and Amber, thanks for sending your questions. Others, please do. David or Courtney, jump in there for that if you want to.
Yeah, I think of something that holds a lot of people back is that you think of the race as a whole. So you think of all of the things that you have to do collectively for the race. If you focus on one thing at a time, it is totally doable. So 250 meter swim, that's 10 lengths of a pool, of a typical 25 meter pool. So if you can swim up and back 5 times, is my math good here? Up and back 5 times, that's your race distance. And yeah, if you want to get on your bike and ride to the San Remo bakery, that's That's like your 5 or 6K. So just take it one thing at a time and try not to think about the whole race, about all of the things that you have to do with the race. Because if you're new to the sport, and particularly if you're nervous about one or more of the disciplines, it's really easy to get overwhelmed when you think about all of the things. But if you stay thinking about one thing at a time, it's really, really much more achievable.
Yeah, I think that's all accurate. I would agree with all of it. And I think, perhaps in an age where we're all sort of, Facebook and Instagram obsessed, there can be a bit of a concern that, well, if I want to do this at all, I want to, do my best, and I want to have sort of Facebook-worthy photos, and I want it to sort of be like an epic moment in my life, and that anything short of, like a, sort of a record-breaking time, or, keeping up with the person that you are racing with, or your friend or your buddy who'd sort of done a race like the year before. We sort of set expectations for ourselves, and those can sort of be your worst enemy in a lot of cases. I think the benefits of doing this type of a race and, building the sort of physical dexterity and the ability to do multiple sports sort of at once, there's a lot of value to just sort of honing those skills independently leading up to the race. And your ability to sort of put them all together in a single event is a real achievement, regardless of how fast you do it, and regardless of what quality sort of photos you get out of the event at the end of the day. So there's no shame in signing up to do a race and then doing it slow, because even if you get out there and you do the swim and you feel like perhaps you just don't have it in you to get on the bike, well, then you've done a lot more that day than the vast majority of the people out there in Toronto. If you do the swim and you do the bike and you feel like you just don't have it in you for the run, obviously you signed up for the whole race, but you completed 2/3 of it. That's a whole lot better than completing none of it. And if you think about trying to become a triathlete in terms of a journey of sorts, you can really build sort of year after year. You don't have to sort of be a pro your first year. You can get out there, give it a try, do your best. It may be an epic disaster, but it's something that you can sort of learn from and do better the next year. And I think that sort of goes to the point of gear a little bit as well. And we haven't really talked about gear. I don't know if we will, but there's sort of a preoccupation, I think, for some people that are starting out doing triathlons, or they think they want to get into it, that you've sort of got to show up on your first race with a full complement of really expensive fancy gear as well. And I think a lot of that, and perhaps setting the standard too high for yourself, can really be an impediment to you even participating. And sometimes if you're just borrowing a buddy's mountain bike and you're getting out there and you're completing the race to the best of your ability, you get a medal at the end of it, and you go home, it's a job well done. You can sort of live to fight another day and try it again the next year and sort of build incrementally on that.
Yeah, I think just building off what David said earlier about you can progress with the sport generally, but even within the TTF, maybe you start with a try this year. You can aspire to do other things in future years, whether it's the sprint, a relay, the Olympic, and then once you've conquered that, and you still come back obviously to the TTF, you can do other things as well. A good example is Brenda Santos is the president of the Toronto Triathlon Club, so she volunteered with us, I think, initially, and then I think she just recently finished her first Ironman recently, and so kudos to that. And it's a good segue at this point to mention that you may think TTF is 6 weeks away, haven't done much training, if at all. Our friends at the Toronto Triathlon Club have created a 5-week training program specifically tailored for the TTF. So that starts June 10th, which is a few days away. So make sure you sign up because spots are kind of limited, but that's a great way to sort of keep yourself honest in one perspective, but also to get coaching and tips, etc. Lots of weekly workshops, if I recall, when I read the description. So thank you to the Toronto Triathlon Club for that. But it's certainly a good way to think of things. It's a stepping stone, the try as it were. Going to some of the questions here. So Lisa is asking, maybe I'll give this to Blair and then everyone else can chime in here. Triathlons seem intense, 2 exclamation marks. What about the first timer who wants to go out go at their own pace and just have fun.
That's what it should boil down to, because really you're not racing against anyone else but yourself. And if it is your first race, pretty sure that means it's your personal best. As cliche as that sounds, but it is. You may have some friends in the event and they've done it for years and they've coddled you to sign up and try it on your own, pardon the pun of trying it. But at the end of the day, it's you against you and you against the clock. If you're not even racing against the clock and you're just going for a finish, that's all it has to be. It just depends on what goals you have. When I race, I usually have 2 or 3 goals. I have the let's just finish because stuff comes up, a knee, whatever. Can I match my time or can I get X time? And then I have a Disneyland, I don't tell anyone time, that if everything goes right and I have a wind at my back, then I'm going to do a cartwheel at the finish line. So really, yeah, it is intense, and it's as intense as you make it, but I've made some pretty cool relationships on the race course when I've had some of my worst races, because I've met people that I wouldn't normally meet as a result of just being out there and keep going.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of those comments, especially the A, B, and C goal. I always have an A, B, and C goal for all of my races as well. Sort of the all stars align. The B is a good day, and then the C is things come up, wheels come off. Pardon. Wow, we're killing it with the puns today. And yeah, so the C goal is things don't go to plan, but you always have some sort of a backup plan. But what I would say, one thing that I noticed about triathlon, I came to triathlon from a running background. One thing that I found very different on the course is when you're on the run leg, the dynamic is very different than it is at a road race. There's a camaraderie out there. That everyone has the same goal to get to the finish. So I would say, Lisa, if you're concerned about the intensity of triathlon, try and stay focused until the run leg, because that's when everyone is sort of out there giving it their all and encouraging all the people around them. But if you are looking to have fun your first time out, you can definitely make that happen. Sometimes it's difficult to block out the intensity because there are some intense people in triathlon. But at the end of the day, for your first time, you really just want to focus on getting to that finish line and getting your best self to the start line as well.
So I'm seeing a bit of a theme here. So Amy, Tara Lynn, and Sean, among others, have asked about the swim, which is predictable. I mean, as we've all referenced a little bit, swimming can be the most intimidating of the 3 disciplines. Any tips on calming nerves kind of at the start line before they're jumping into the water? Maybe also the differences between open water swimming and pool swimming, you know, what you should do in the pool to replicate the open water swim. And before I turn it over to these guys, maybe give you a description of the swim for the Tri-Tri, which is the same area for the races on the Sunday. It's down at Ontario Place, and it's in the West Channel, the Inner Harbor down at Ontario Place. So if you're not familiar with the area, it's kind of closed off from the open water. So there is a break wall among other buildings, edifices that preclude too many waves from happening. And again, not to diminish it, because 250 meters to someone who's never swum before is long, but it's not too long. But that's kind of the location where you'll be swimming, to give you some context. But maybe talk about swim nerves, how do you overcome it, and if people are mostly swimming in pools, how and what should they do to prepare for open water. And then I think you'll probably say get in open water at some point. But over to you, Blair, to start.
Well, I'll take one step back. Jeff did say if it is your first swim, I strongly suggest you do some pool swimming before the race day. I think I sort of heard you say that. But you're just over 6 weeks out of race day right now. There's tons of time to get to that distance. Even if you get to, say, 80% of that distance of 250 meters, you are in good shape for race day. Open water swimming is definitely a different beast than pool swimming. You don't have that lovely line at the bottom of the pool that you can kind of follow into a straight line. However, I was pleasantly surprised the first time I swam the inaugural year, TTF, how clear that water is, and actually how calm that water is. Because I have swum in races where it's been pretty windy and it's been choppy. You don't get that in the inner West Channel because of that breakwater. And as I mentioned, you can see the bottom. You may see some lake weed, but it's actually refreshing. It's a cool water temperature, but it's a great swim. To maybe get yourself a little more used to it, if you are in the pool, and please chime in, every so often close your eyes for a few strokes and see how straight you can still swim. It kind of helps. And then open your eyes and make sure you don't run into the wall. Another thing you can do, hold back. Let the fray go, watch them go, and then you can just follow them, and then you have someone to follow. And it's a little bit easier than just having someone push you off course. That happened to Jeff, and it's happened to me. Please chime in if anything else comes off the top of you guys.
Courtney, maybe one thing you can talk about, because I know we talked about this before, is the idea of open water swimming. Where can people go? Like, what do you suggest people do to overcome that fear? Where are some of the places you do that? How can people maybe do it with the Toronto Triathlon Club?
Yeah, so when I'm in the city, I do most of my open water swimming down at Cherry Beach. Starting in July, the club is going to be going down there every Wednesday. So you can head on over to the website and find all of the details of that. Those are coached swims, so there is a very, very good coach on hand to sort of guide you through the open water. Definitely get into the open water before race day if you can. Race morning, do a warm-up. Even if you get into the water for a few minutes, if it feels super cold, splash water all over your face, blow bubbles in the water right away. Those are a few of the quick things that you can do on race day. And if you get started, when the race starts and you're starting to panic, my number one bit of advice, just count your strokes. If you only have to focus on counting, I usually go, if I'm super panicked, I'll go 30 at a time, repeat. 30 at a time, repeat. And at least the counting will give you something to focus on so you can steady your breathing. I personally try to sight every 3 to 7-ish strokes. I'm a bilateral breather, and I know that not everyone breathes to both sides swimming on race day, but that's the way I learned, so I try to breathe every 3 strokes, and I sight every 3 to 7 strokes. So pick something on land in the distance that's not moving, and try to use that to keep you going in a straight line.
So a couple quick things before I turn it over to you, David. So water temperature-wise, just for last year it was 18 degrees. That's not a steam bath, but it's not freezing. And again, you have a wetsuit on and you're going to be moving, so it's all good. From a historical perspective, it's always been between 14 degrees and even 21 degrees one year, I think back in 2015. So that gives you a feel for temperature. The other thing I would stress, and I think Courtney, you mentioned this, is we actually have a swim course familiarization. So for the Tri, which is on the Saturday, we'll circulate this information much closer to the race date. It'll be sometime on Friday, late afternoon, evening. And if you are tuning in and it's relevant to Sunday races, again, Saturday we'll have swim course familiarization and circulate that information closer to race date through the race briefing, among other things. So those are 2 things to keep in mind. Water temperature, and get in the water not only the day before, but there'll be limited sort of ability before your wave starts to get into the water, and encourage you to acclimate morning of, because things can change overnight. But David, do you have any thoughts on swimming?
Not a ton. I mean, I did the Toronto Triathlon Club open water swims. It's Cherry Beach, right?
Cherry Beach, yeah.
And they're very, very helpful. Like, all the people involved are great. The instructors are great. If it's your first time putting on a wetsuit, there are people there that can sort of show you how that works, and it's an interesting experience.
It certainly is.
Yeah, but it's helpful just to sort of be around people where before the race day you can sort of sit on the beach with 10 or 15 or 20 people, struggle with your wetsuit a bit, have someone help you, give you some pointers, and then you all sort of get into the water together. where there's no immediate pressure of an imminent race in front of you, and it can really help you to calm your nerves and just get sort of generally more comfortable with being in the water, having your head sort of in the water, sort of outside the context of a lighted pool with a straight line and on the bottom. So it's definitely helpful to do that.
There are also, for anyone who's worried about safety on race day, there are kayaks out in the water, and you're allowed to grab onto those kayaks as long as you're not using them to move forward. If you need to stop and have a rest, a kayaker will pull up beside you and you can stick your arm up and hang out for a little bit.
No penalty.
No penalty. Yeah. So if you need to take a rest and get your bearings again, there are going to be people in the water who are there for your safety and also for your comfort if you need to stop for a little rest.
So maybe I'll ask myself one last question before turning it to these guys, because we're going to wrap this up shortly. We can ask them maybe for some words of inspiration in 20 seconds for our audience here. But Amber asks a question about, what if my wheel comes off or I get a flat? Do I have to fix it myself? Now, we will have people from Dornella's. So Eon, I'm not sure he's watching, but shout out to him. He's been a supporter not only of the sport for many, many, many decades and a highly accomplished cyclist, but Dornella's is a retailer, is a community partner, so they'll be on hand not only in transition to help you out morning of, but also on course. Should you have a flat, we'll take care of you, so not to worry there, Amber. But maybe Courtney, starting with you and then going this way, don't know if that's clockwise or what have you. 20 seconds, words of inspiration, why people should sort of do the TTF and try if that's something they're contemplating.
I guess why not?
Sure.
So to say why do the try, why not do the try? I think most of you would surprise yourself. So I always like to say, when I'm in a hard race situation, I can do hard things. So you can too.
Blair?
I'd say the only thing that's holding you back is you. In a race, when you're racing against yourself, it's you. On that run that you just don't want to do, that's the only thing holding you back is you. So when you cross that line, you will truly understand why you suffered through the training, why you worked that hard, why you persevered. And that's when maybe that addiction may set in.
Oh yeah.
And it becomes more of what you become. And it only makes you better.
I think it's sort of been said, but I think in most cases you get out there and you'll really surprise yourself. Signing up is one thing, doing the training is one thing, but showing up sort of on race day and, even if it's a matter of just sort of taking your time and, getting through each of the segments of the race, eventually you're going to get to the finish line. You're going to feel, a great sense of accomplishment, regardless of your time, just because you committed to doing the race, you put in some time up front to train, and you showed up and you did it.
So the live's about to end, so thank you again for joining us. Thanks to David, Blair, and Courtney for helping out here. Hopefully you learned some things. Reach out to us on Facebook, but we're also reachable on Instagram and Twitter, so don't hesitate if you have questions. And we appreciate you spending 30 minutes with us today. Just to reiterate, the 5-week training camp is something you should take advantage of. So go to torontotriathlonclub.org to find out more information and to sign up. So thanks again, and we'll see you in 6 weeks at the TTF. Thank you. Just take it.
Just gonna work for a second.